Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Growing Our Creative Workforce. This session is kindly sponsored by Iridia Medical. My name is Manu Nelutla, and I'm the Executive Director at Actsafe Safety Association. Before we start this session, I would like to first acknowledge the traditional indigenous lands that we all live and gather on today. Although this session is online, we each still enjoy the pleasure of living within an indigenous territory. To highlight the importance of the acknowledgement, I would like to urge you, following this session, to visit the Native Land Digital website and search the territory on which you are located. That website is www.native-land.ca. Before we start, I would like to remind you all to please mute yourselves in Remo. If you're there in Remo, please make sure that your mics are muted before the session continues. Coming to this session, it's my privilege to welcome the moderator of this session, Prem Gill, who is the CEO of Creative BC. Thanks, Prem, for joining us today. Prem is also joined on the panel by Bohol Baines, Joan Jenkinson, Anthony Jiva, Lisa Purdy, and Valerie Singh Turner. We welcome you all on this to this panel. And there is a poll that we would like you all to participate so that the panel speakers can get a good idea of composition of this audience. Once again, this is anonymous, so and the questions will be on your screen in a moment. So there are your pre-session questions for the poll. The questions are: what sector do you work in? What role do you have in the industry? And please indicate what union or guild you belong to. And how do you identify in terms of radicalized or ethnic identity? Check one or more options for that last question. And just a reminder, for the purposes of this poll, we are only asking demographic questions focused on racial identity and not about other underrepresented communities like LGBTQ+ or people with disabilities. So please answer those questions. Meanwhile, I wanted to remind you all that as the panel is going on, as the session is going on, if you have any questions that you would like to ask our panel members during the panel or during the question time, please write them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screens. So if you look at our Zoom screen, you will see there is two options. One is Q&A and the other one is chat. Please don't put your questions in the chat box. Please put it into the Q&A section so that our moderator Prem can go through them and ask the panel questions. So without further delay, let me welcome to the moderator of the session, Prem Gill. Prem, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Manu, and thank you for inviting all of us and me to be here today. And thanks to everybody who's taking time out of their Saturday afternoon to join us. I am the CEO of Creative BC, and I am here on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, a land which my family has been settled on since the mid-1960s. We have a very jam-packed session here for you today with some amazing speakers who are going to tell us about their organizations and in some cases the platforms that they have developed. And really our goal is to help everybody understand what is happening out there and the various ways that you can be part of transforming our workforce, but also helping to continue to grow it. And to start out, we are going to, I'll just do I know that Manu introduced everybody, but I'll just do a quick tell you what the organizations are that people are joining us from. Valerie Singh Turner from Culturebrew, Anthony Jiwa from Out on Set, Bohol Baines from Access Real World, and Joan Jenkinson from the Black Screen Office. So we're going to hear from each of them for about 10-15 minutes each. And then we will, I'll keep an eye on the questions just from a technical perspective, and then we'll have a bit of a roundup at the end. So we're going to dive right into it, and I'm going to ask my colleague, Lisa Purdy from Nocio Media. Lisa works a lot with Creative BC on workforce development pieces that we're doing. So we thought we'd help sort of set the stage for everybody to really get a sense of what's happening in British Columbia and what does our workforce look like right now and why do we need to do this. So we spent the last couple of years doing a study that Lisa will get into in a moment. But just before that, not everybody out there who's tuned in may be familiar with Creative BC. If you're not, we are an organization that is a nonprofit who's supported financially from the province of British Columbia to support the development of the creative industries, which include the film and television industries, visual effects, animation, video games, books, magazines, and music. And specifically today, we'll be focusing on our work around the motion picture sector. And we also, so we provide grant programs across all these sectors. We also are the managers and the administrators of the motion picture tax credit programs, as well as the film commission services for the province. And I think if you are currently working on a production, you would know that we're having it's a pretty busy time. I left my home this morning. There's a production crew set up on my block. So it's happening across the Metro Vancouver and across the province. To give you a sense, last year at this time, just before the pandemic, we probably had about 13 to 15 active productions, and that's pretty average year over year for us around this time of year. Right now we have almost 40, so that gives you a sense of what's happening and how we're continuing to develop and grow the work here. So I will stop now and ask Lisa to give a quick briefing on what we've been doing around understanding what the labor force looks like, particularly the below the line workforce here in BC. Lisa?
Thanks, Prem. I'm happy to be here and join everyone this afternoon. A couple of years ago, we did a labor market study for the industry, and it was a joint initiative with the Motion Picture Industry Associations, the labor orgs, the producers associations, and the payroll companies. And we were able to determine what the supply and demand dynamics were for the below the line workforce. So from everything from stunts to greens to performers. What we understand through this very detailed analysis is that we have an aging workforce, an incredible amount of knowledge that's about to retire. And we also have, as Prem alluded to, a lot of growth projected. BC continues to remain a location of choice and is globally competitive that way. And so we have a real opportunity to grow the workforce between 5 and 10% are our projections per year up until 2027, which is as far as we can see in the future. So we learned a lot in the study about how often people work and how much they work, what their education is, and what their pathways were into the industry. And although it wasn't a demographic study, we also understood that Indigenous Canadians, racialized Canadians, and women were underrepresented in the workforce. At the time, we didn't measure persons with disabilities or sexual orientation, so we left that. We didn't do any study on those particular underrepresented groups, but we do know overall there is challenges to enter and advance into the industry if you're from an underrepresented group. So out of the study, which again, we did in partnership and collaborations with unions and guilds and producers, we came up with some recommendations. Clearly, we have to improve the system and enhance it. And a lot of that has to do with how we recruit. So instead of who you know, we need to find different ways to recruit into this workforce because, as you all know, it's rapid scaling and sort of word of mouth. We also need to support the workforce with training to increase what I call cultural competency. So let's make it a more welcome and safe workplace for people, because sets can sometimes be less than welcoming. It's a challenging work environment. So one of the things we know is that we have to expand beyond the existing network, and so the platforms and programs that you're going to be introduced to today are a really important tool in helping recruit differently.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And while our study was focused, like we said, around that below the line workforce, the work that we do here at Creative BC also focuses on that above the line workforce, which includes producers, writers, directors through our various grant programs. And again, looking very specifically at underrepresented peoples like Indigenous people, Black people, racialized people, which reminded me when you said that, Lisa, that the polling question had a typo. It's not radicalized or ethnic people's identity. It was meant to be racialized. So apologies for that if anybody was like, what? It was a unfortunate typo. So that's what we have again, there's lots going on here at Creative BC, but that's some of the work we've been doing with the industry. And there'll be ways in the coming weeks and months for more people to get involved as this develops. And I think one of the key things that Lisa talked about here is that the cultural competencies, which is a big piece of it. We know we have Black people, Indigenous people, LGBTQ people. We have a lot of different people currently in our workforce. We also know there's been barriers to advancement. There is challenges, but there's also a lot of good work happening. And then there's also the entry into the industry. And the organizations we're going to hear from today, a lot of them are very focused on that. And the first person we're going to hear from is Valerie Singh Turner from Culturebrew.art. And there's been a lot of great directories and tools in the last, I'm going to say 6-12 months, both nationally and here in BC that have come online. Culturebrew, though, has been around for a few years, I think. So they've been doing a lot of this work and also includes the performing arts sector. So if there's nothing else, Lisa, that you want to say, I think we're going to move along to Valerie, who's going to share some slides. So how it'll work is Valerie's going to share some slides, which will give you an overview of their organization. And then if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and then I'll do a bit of a follow-up with questions with Valerie. So hi, Valerie.
Hey, Prem, thank you for that. Hang on, I'm just going to share my screen, I think. And hopefully people can see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you for the land acknowledgement, Prem. I think it's really important, and I would also like to acknowledge that Visceral Visions operates on unceded Coast Salish territories, and we are really grateful for that privilege. So as Prem mentioned, my name is Valerie Singh Turner. I am the founder and artistic producer of Visceral Visions and the creative director of Culturebrew.art. Our mandate is to champion diverse, provocative voices that struggle to be heard in an increasingly homogenized world through all media of artistic expression, and to promote and foster Indigenous and racialized Canadian artists. Embedded in our mandate is the understanding that racism and systemic racism are issues of power, and that if we acknowledge that systemic racism results in physical, financial, emotional, and psychological harm to Indigenous and racialized peoples, then systemic racism is a workplace safety issue and should therefore not be tolerated in a respectful work environment. And further to that, if we acknowledge that all media influence thought and behavior, then what we do and represent on stage and on screen has real-world consequences. And if we as artists are not engaging with the realities of the world in the here and now, then what the fuck are we doing? As anti-apartheid and human rights activist Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you've chosen the side of the oppressor. So one of the biggest misconceptions by white engagers is the false conclusion that since they're unable to find Indigenous and racialized artists, we don't exist. An outreach problem is conflated with lack of supply. So to address that issue, about 5 years ago, we started the research and development to create Culturebrew.art, or CBA, which is a digital platform whose central tool is a searchable database of BIPOC artists who work in the literary, performing, and media arts. Culturebrew.art is envisioned to be a web platform that would promote and foster intersectional interculturalism, build connection, collaboration, and community, be interdisciplinary, be accessible financially and for those who require assistive devices to access the internet, be national in scope, a space that prioritizes the privacy, safety, and security of BIPOC artists, provide a suite of digital tools to facilitate artistic practice, collaboration, and solidarity, and provide a digital home created by racialized artists for BIPOC artists with an intersectional racial equity lens. So CBA serves two distinct communities. The first and our priority are BIPOC artists. This group can include directors of all kinds, whether for stage or screen, fight directors, stunt coordinators, technical directors, intimacy coordinators, creators such as writers, composers, filmmakers, choreographers, performers, including actors, dancers, musicians, and singers from opera to hip hop, puppeteers, DJs, stand-up comedians, and behind the scenes artists such as set, costume, sound, lighting, and projection designers, DOPs, dialect coaches, dramaturgs, producers, cultural workers in the film and broadcast industry, and more. All of these artists sign up through CBA's artist portal. And since we're at a health and safety conference, I wanted to take a brief moment to talk about accessibility, privacy, and security at culturebrew.art. So to ensure accessibility for all artists and engagers, we worked with a firm that provided racially diverse testers who used assistive devices to test our site. So CBA meets accessibility standards of WCAG 2.0 at a minimum level of AA and sometimes AAA, which is the top level. While membership in CBA is a nominal $25 a year for artists, no artist will be turned away for lack of funds, and protocols are in place to ensure that artists who don't have a credit card can still register. In recognition of the fact that Indigenous and racialized folks, particularly women of color, suffer higher rates of online harassment, we've developed privacy and safety protocols to maintain a safer online space for BIPOC artists to engage with each other, as well as with the folks who wish to employ them. There's not enough time to list everything, but some of our protocols include securely hosting all CBA data on servers located in Canada and owned by a Canadian company. Now, this is important because the American Patriot Act, passed after 9/11, allows the FBI to force anyone, including internet service providers, to turn over records of their clients and customers. More recent legislation gave the American government the ability to compel Canadian subsidiaries of American companies to also turn over their records. So this is especially concerning for Indigenous and racialized artists because many are also activists and outspoken critics of the powers that be. We pay a monthly fee to ensure that all our data in CBA is encrypted, both in transit and at rest. Only paid subscribers, not the general public, are given access to CBA. Having a fee-for-service model discourages would-be trolls who currently roam free platforms with impunity, such as Facebook and Twitter, and you know who they are. We worked with a certified professional privacy consultant and a lawyer to develop our code of conduct in terms of service, to which every artist and engager must actively agree. We applied for special approval from the BC Human Rights Tribunal for an exemption to the BC Human Rights Code, which allows us to restrict the provision of our services to BIPOC artists. What this means in practice is that Visceral Visions, and by extension, the BIPOC community in CBA, is protected from any nuisance lawsuits or claims of discrimination by white artists for their exclusion from culturebrew.art. And finally, we continue to work with a certified privacy professional who's also a woman of color to ensure that all of our policies and procedures promote online safety, privacy, and protection from identity theft, as well as harassment. Our other distinct community is comprised of the individuals and organizations seeking to employ BIPOC artists, such as theater, opera, dance companies, film and TV industry, music and other festivals, digital new media, and of course, BIPOC artists wanting to find like-minded artists to collaborate with. And since our goal is systemic disruption, Culturebrew.art will also be promoted to schools seeking artists to work with students, post-secondary training programs seeking faculty and guest artists, community and social service agencies seeking artists to work with immigrants, refugees, and BIPOC queer youth and other marginalized groups, ad agencies and other businesses, and government and funding agencies seeking to fill arts advisories and peer juries. All of these folks will be able to access and engage with BIPOC artists through our Engager portal, which is due to launch next month, assuming the tech goddess smiles on us, and which offers the same standards of accessibility, privacy, and security as the artist portal. The search artist feature in the Engager portal will display a list of search parameters running down the left side and thumbnail portraits of artists matching whatever search fields are checked off. Clicking on a card We'll display an artist's full profile that must include their racial and ethnic identity, at least one artistic discipline, and a bio or artistic statement. Profiles can also include other information such as gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, whether they identify as a deaf artist, languages, including sign languages, professional associations, marketable skills such as teaching, diversity consulting, cultural consulting, and portfolio materials such as headshots, production stills, as well as audio and video clips. Artists also have the ability to create tags to add more specific identifiers. For example, if they identify as Musqueam or Cree, and if an artist profile inspires you to connect, there's a button on every artist profile that allows you to privately and securely message the artist through our internal messaging system. If you're not logged into our site, an email notification is sent to you within 5 minutes of the message being sent. The search capabilities offered to engagers will be much more robust than that offered through the artist portal. In addition to filtering by city and province, racial, ethnic, and identity, and artistic disciplines, engagers can also search by artist name, sexual orientation, disability, whether they're deaf, and by gender. Now, we're still in the testing phase of the Engager portal, so while these screenshots are from just yesterday, we are making a number of adjustments to the final product. The work of Culturebrew.art would not have been possible without the support of our incredible funders, and the work is ongoing. Once the Engager portal launches, our next major piece of work will be build an opportunities feature that will allow engagers to post auditions, job postings, calls for submission, which artists will be able to search and or filter by artistic discipline or position and by racial identity. In the meantime, engagers can include URLs with a link to their job postings, auditions, and other opportunities in their direct messages to artists. We've also confirmed funding from the Canada Council to build a CBA mobile app. So while the Engager portal is not yet live, I invite you to sign up to our mailing list through our site to receive an email notification as soon as the Engager portal launches. And if you're a BIPOC artist, we are having a pandemic special that will waive the $25 fee for first year. Just contact us at community@culturebrew.art and let us know you are part of the Actsafe Conference. That's it for me.
That's great. Thank you, Valerie. So if you want to unshare, we can I have a few follow-up questions. And if anybody has questions, please, now's the time, if you have them for Valerie, to start to put them in the Q&A. So thank you so much. Clearly a lot of work and a lot of years of planning. And I'm just curious if you have any examples of how people, especially employers, have been using your platform and what the results look like for them.
Well, like I said, so we started with the artist portal first, and because we really wanted to prioritize the needs of BIPOC artists, and then we started building the Engager portal. So as I say, the Engager portal is launching in March, so we don't actually have a sense of how the engagers are going to be, what kind of feedback we will have from them. We're having a contest right now because we relaunched the messaging system to upgrade its privacy features. And so we had a survey as part of the contest. We're offering a $100 prize for artists who message, and the contest is still ongoing. There's 3 more weeks to it. We're having a draw every week for $100. So if you're an artist, get in there. But we did have a survey that asked, to rate out of 5 stars the messaging system and their experience with CBA overall. And here, I have these here. So for the messaging system, the average score was 5 out of 5, 84% gave us a 5 out of 5, and 16% gave us 4 out of 5. And for the CBA site overall, 74% gave us 5 out of 5 stars, and 16% gave us 4 out of 5 stars, and 10% gave us 3 out of 5. So I think the thought and the time we're taking to ensure that it meets the needs of our communities is paying off in that way. I mean, there's still things in the back end, like all the privacy and security stuff they don't really see, but it's important for people to feel comfortable because the internet's pretty wild out there, as we all know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, so thank you. I think, and you're going to hear from, a couple of other directory type of platforms as well today. And the great thing is they can all be very complementary, right? And you can be on more than one of them. And are you finding that it's starting to populate more with more people?
Yeah, it's certainly helping. Like, we didn't really start to massively promote the site until we were sure that it was working. Tech is complicated, and the tech industry is very male and very white. And so it often took more time to really, for them to understand our needs, because it was super challenging. And so, we thought we were told when we first started, oh, we can build this in like 6 to 9 months. No, not if you're trying to do something that prioritizes women, racialized people, indigenous people, because that mindset it took a lot of work to we're still educating, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting point just around the supplier companies. It's conversations that are happening industry wide around also ensuring that in addition to the actual workforce, there's all kinds of indirect companies and organizations that work with the creative industries. And how do we identify more supplier companies that are owned by underrepresented people, racialized people, Black people, indigenous people, because they are there, including tech companies. So that's really interesting. There's a question from someone, Valerie, if there is a media kit available for organizations to promote Culturebrew.
We are just putting that together now. So it's going to be released when we release the Engager portal. So in the next couple of weeks or so. But please reach out to me, creative director at culturebrew.art, or just if you do the community@culturebrew.art email, if that's easier to remember, they will forward it to me. And you can go to our site. You can also contact me through our site.
And there was also a question somebody is asking, I think this is in reference to maybe the polling questions, that they didn't see a Latin American community represented as a specific category. And I'm sorry, I can't recall. That was not a deliberate omission.
It was on our list.
It was on our list. I'm not sure what the question, if the person who put that question, if you want to expand on that, happy to address it. Anybody from the panel have any questions for Valerie before we move on to the next speaker or comments? I'm sure you do, but we can also wait till the end. Lisa.
There's one more question here. It's not a question, just a comment.
Okay. Great. People are very excited about your platform, Valerie. And what's happening.
We are very excited too. I can't wait to, sorry, I'm typing in an answer for one of the people asking a question, how to contact me. I hope I typed that properly. It has been a really long haul. Like I said, we were told initially that, they could get it up in 6 to 9 months, and it's been almost 2.5 years since we started the actual tech development. And like I said, so even just yesterday when we had our latest meeting with our tech developer, we're very conscious about, making sure we're really inclusive, and that, we make sure that Indigenous artists are respected in a particular way. And so, like, even in our list of racial and ethnic identities for the search fields, we were very specific. We put all the Indigenous ones up at the top, and we had Indigenous First Nations, Indigenous Métis, Indigenous Inuit, and we also had Indigenous from beyond North America, because there's sometimes a lack of awareness that Indigenous peoples are from all over, but there are very specific Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island, or what we know as North America. And so we listed those at the top, and then everybody else was alphabetical, all the other ones underneath, the other diasporas. And then when we saw it yesterday, we went, well, what happened? We asked for this to be in a particular way, and they said, oh, it's standardized for this to be alphabetical, which makes sense for when we're listing artistic disciplines and gender and disabilities and stuff. But we're trying to create a more respectful and conscious space for BIPOC artists. And so we said, no, that's not acceptable. We have to spend more money now to pay you to customize, these things. So that's just sort of one example of all, these small things that really add up to extra time, extra education and explanation, and extra money, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'm sure others will relate to that who are here to talk about the work that they're doing. So thank you so much, Valerie. We're going to move on to Anthony. Anthony G was from Out TV and just developed a new tool called Out on Set. And he is going to walk us through a couple of slides. And I think Lisa is managing the slides. And then Anthony, you and I can have a bit of a chat. You can tell us more about it. So hi, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you. And I'm very relieved that Lisa's managing my slides because unlike Valerie, I cannot do two things at once.
I'm working on it.
I'm from Out TV. So Out TV is best known as Canada's LGBTQ broadcaster. We're the first LGBTQ broadcaster in the world. And so for us, obviously, part of our remit is to deliver content and create content that is relevant and by and for LGBTQ people. And a big challenge that we sort of been facing throughout the network's existence, and I've only been with the network for about 3 years, is if we challenge, and this is sort of the genesis of Out on Set, is one is we'll have a lot of questions from networks or producers or production companies saying, we're looking to have a trans female writer for a show. Can you help us find that? And obviously, we really want to support artists and creators, but also our remit is not to help network development at other TV networks. And so that's sort of a balance for us, is that we really do want to amplify and raise those voices, but we also need to do it while also, we also have to keep an eye on our own corner store. And the second piece of it is when we talk to producers, a lot of them we'll challenge them and say, we want there to be more people on set or of your talent or in your writer's room who are queer, and they will come to us and sort of say, well, I don't know how to do it, or I can't find these people. And we sort of realize that kind of awareness and asking for something is not really enough. And so, we want to do all the work for people, but we also do want to provide the tools for them. And so that's kind of where the genesis of Out on Set came from. And we work really closely with Inside Out, which is a film festival in Toronto, one of the leading queer film festivals in the world, who also face a lot of those same challenges and requests. And so we thought this is a really great way where we kind of have a really great relationship in the TV world. They're much more focused on features. And that's where Out on Set came from. And for us, we're not just stuck in Canada. We're also focused on all of North America. And it is everyone from writers all the way through to post. So anyone who's in a screen-based industry, creative, is who we're envisioning having on this site. And it is similar to what Valerie's mentioning. We really do strive to connect production companies, agencies, and networks to queer and trans talent. And a big challenge, and from a demographic perspective, I think people are maybe not aware of, because many decision makers in our industry tend to be Gen X or boomers, is that if you look at the percentage of audience or of the population which identifies as LGBTQ, Gallup just did an announcement last week. For Gen Z, it comes in at 15.9%. For boomers, it's 2%. So if you are looking at your own age cohort and saying, well, we have this many people who are LGBT on set or on a production, that actually doesn't reflect the reality of what our audiences probably are. And that's the blind spot that everyone has. It's whatever group you're part of, you really kind of are only able to see that. And so it's to help sort of open the eyes to people of what that audience is. And also to that there is a massive amount of talent that's out there. So we're also launching in March 2021, and there is 2 streams on it. So one is for talent, and the other is for production companies, agencies, and networks who are seeking out that talent. If you look at the next slide, that'd be great. And so these are some of our objectives for it. One is to increase hires in all elements. And that's something which we can do. We can influence that at Out TV on our own productions, on our own commissions, but we really feel we have a remit to do that for the community nationwide and also in the US. The other part is also, as I said before, is to provide access. There are a lot of barriers. As we all know, this is an industry where people people tend to rehire people they've worked with before, which makes it really challenging if you're not part of a group to sort of penetrate and have those opportunities. But the other thing which was borne out even when we started building this and announcing Out on Set was a large number of people who identify as queer have come forward and said, we actually have to code switch. And, what are we going to be blacklisted? What are the consequences going to be if we put our hand up and say, I'm part of this community? That actually may limit employment opportunities. So that's something which is a really real concern for people who are LGBTQ in this industry. And so that's kind of from a broader perspective. But then also there's a lot of people who are queer, who are making small and independent productions, who would prefer to have a cast and a crew that are predominantly LGBTQ, just so that it's a more authentic story and it is it's a more inclusive environment. And it is very, very difficult for them to seek out those teams wherever they may be. And then finally for us is, we have made the choice to make Out on Set to be free, and that really to qualify, you just have to have 1 credit. So we're not making it really complicated to be eligible for it, because we really do want to create a space where LGBTQ talent are able to find each other and also be found if they want to be. And similar to what Valerie was mentioning, we are very aware of privacy concerns and of the reality of what happens on the internet. It's not necessarily the safest space or the most accepting space for people. And so for that reason, we've made it where messaging is actually the talent are the ones in control of how much they want to show. So you're not required to show a headshot. You're not required to show your specific location or even your name. And that it's only once you feel comfortable and able to do that. That was something that it was a piece of feedback we got very, very early on in development of the database. And so that's sort of a really top line overview. We will be launching in March. The URL is outonset.com, and that you're able to register there currently. And then we're intaking people with a sort of a basic intake form. And then when we launch later on in March, there will be a more complete intake form where people can sort of list all their credits and everything like that. So they'll be able to be searchable and hopefully increase representation for queer people on set in Canada and the US.
Great, thank you so much, Anthony. I think we'll come back, Lisa, to me and Anthony now for a little some questions I have for you. So thank you so much. I mean, again, amazing that these tools are being developed and have launched and are accessible to so many people. Within the, are you also asking those questions around racial identity within the context of Out on Set?
We are asking those questions, but we also feel that, we have a very narrow focus. So obviously in the case of our community, it is by definition intersectional. And
Right.
So we do want to reflect that. But I think there are other people on this panel that are doing that work. And I think it's like we sort of see ourselves as being complementary to them, not a way of sort of saying, if you're LGBT and Black, yeah, of course we want people to be able to highlight that and identify, like, be able to be visible. But we also feel there's, our primary mandate is very specifically focused on that identification versus all others. But people will be able to register that, absolutely.
And you used a term that may not be familiar to some of our participants, code switching. Would you mind diving into that a little bit? I think that it might be new to some.
Sure. I think that probably many on the panel are very familiar with it, but I think it's basically, I think if you, when you go into a workplace which is primarily straight or primarily white, as a someone who's BIPOC, someone who's Black, someone who is LGBT, you kind of do need to speak that language, and then kind of when you come back home, you kind of can revert back to sort of how you actually talk, and that kind of is a way of, I think, people often talk about tone policing, or are told like you're too aggressive, and I think that's an example of when you code switch, you are protecting yourself against that, because it's just a way of kind of existing and surviving in a certain environment, and that's which is I think most people do find a need to do that. There are some sets. I think one of our shows, RuPaul's Drag Race, is not a commission of ours, but it's a very successful show for us, that's an example of a set where you don't have to code switch because it is a very, very LGBTQ set from top to bottom. But I think that's the only show I can really think of where that is the case.
Yeah, no, that's a really great example. And I think, you know, generally a lot of what you were talking about is really that, like, changing, you know, diversifying the decision makers, the commissioning editors, the people behind the scenes, in front of the camera. It all has to happen in parallel for all of the changes that everybody's talking about here to benefit all of us as a, you know, a broader community.
Well, and it's a choice, right? Like you can choose not to be diverse. You can choose to not be diverse in your hiring. That's a choice that you can make. But there are real consequences to that. And I think people are aware that if someone makes that choice, other people are going to respond to those choices. And I think that's something which behooves people to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's also, I found it interesting that you said that it's non queer broadcasters or platforms that are coming specifically to you and or to, you know, Inside Out or Out on Screen, who are based out here specifically looking for people. I think many of the panelists have probably had those experiences. Is they don't know where to find people. So, you know, I know that you haven't launched yet, but will the design of the site from you know, whether you're a commissioning editor or an employer, will it be easy to sort of go in and find people, especially jurisdictionally, like across North America?
Yes, I think, you know, there are the two streams. So if someone is a commissioner, then they will be able to kind of go in and search people. And we are, one challenge from a data point perspective, which we're still kind of arguing with, even though we're weeks away from launch, is closed-ended versus open-ended. So in terms of making it, you know, I think one thing that I think it's people's response to change is if it's a lot of work, they're not necessarily on board with doing it. And so from a search perspective, people are using filters to search for things. The more open-ended we let people respond, the more difficult it is. So it's kind of that balance of we want people to be able to identify how they really, how they identify and what they want to speak about, but also have it where the filters can be used so people can search them accurately. And from a location perspective, I mean, really, you know, people can put the territories on it. We're not requiring it. So someone is based in LA or someone's based in Winnipeg and they feel comfortable putting that on there, they're able to do it. It's not a requirement of it. And that does add a little bit of friction, in all honesty, and we're aware of that. But it is that balance that not everybody feels safe in disclosing that information for people to just be able to find it.
Right, which is that's a big thing, right? If they don't feel safe, then that's something I think we have to all examine as individuals as well. That is something that, how do we start to impact and change that? You know, the other thing I think I'd like to point out is that while these directories can be very specific, like yours, it's not just queer productions that people are looking to work on, right? I think that's, you know, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's just about where do you find a broad range of talent and people across multiple roles. And what Lisa said at the beginning, and I think Valerie said it as well, is that we constantly hear like, well, they're just, you know, there are no X type of people, so we can't help that.
And we hear that all the time, including from queer productions when it comes to other groups as well. Like, so they may have representation for people who are LGBT, but they have some reluctance or resistance or difficulty hiring people who are non-white. And that's something where, you know, we challenge them and say there are resources for you that exist. Some of them are speaking today. But from a production perspective, I think there's sort of two pieces to that. One is just because someone is queer does not mean they only want to work on a queer production. I used to work in kids TV. There are a lot of really talented people in kids TV who are identified as LGBT, and those productions are by no means queer productions. And so I think that's one piece. Just because someone identifies one way does not mean that's their entire life. And that actually is, from a creative perspective, even from productions that are not primarily LGBTQ stories, is one that we try to explain to people is that if you're making a show for Gen Z and you have like 5% of your cast is LGBT, like you don't get a gold star, you get an incomplete, because that is actually less than what the actual population is represented as. So I think it's like that may be a start, but like I don't think you're really owed any kind of forward congratulations, because you're still underrepresenting people. And I think that's true for all the different, for all the people speaking on this panel today. I think it's true for lots of different groups, not just for LGBT. And I appreciate that there are like small steps to be made, but even in your everyday life, there are lots of people who are not white, and there are lots of people who do not identify as straight. And that's also the representation that we want, and for it to be authentic and accurate. And you really can't get that unless, I mean, in our opinion, you really do need to have participation from people from various groups to have that diversity for that to be relevant and accurate for the entire audience.
Yeah, and I think that's really the point of this whole conversation, really, honestly. Like that is such a critical thing. And there's so much within that. We're not going to be able to dive into it today, but thank you for sharing the work that you're doing and you're starting to do. We will keep an eye out. You said you're launching in March, so Monday is March, so I guess it's coming out sometime in the next 31
days. Not early
days.
March.
The next 31
it's
days.
Not March 1st,
March.
I can promise you that.
Yeah, but it's really great. And I think it's also, Out TV, people may not know, is one of the few broadcasters that actually is headquartered out of Vancouver. So, I think that's really great that you are taking the leadership in this, as so many people here are in the different things that we're doing. So thank you, Anthony. We're going to come back at the end and talk a little bit more. One thing I'd like all the panelists to start thinking about, just in terms of a question at the end, is really what are the critical things that if we're asking the audience to think about what changes they can make to make all of this effective. So, start thinking about that. One organization or that's not here, there's a lot of people doing really amazing work right now. And I just do want to acknowledge that the Indigenous Screen Office, who are based out of Ontario right now, but have a very national focus across the many land and territories across the country, they have a really amazing document that, if you're not aware of it, it is linked also from the Creative BC website, but also from their website. The Indigenous Screen Office it's called Pathways and Protocols, and working with both Indigenous creators, Indigenous productions. Really valuable and worth your time. So before I forgot, I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. If you have never seen that document, I reference it quite frequently, as a great document. Now we're going to move to our friends in Toronto, starting with Bohol Baines, who is from Out on Screen, Access Real World is the platform, and you're going to tell us about some of the work that you're doing. So welcome, and thanks so much for it's almost Saturday night in Toronto, so thanks for joining us today. So Bohol, over to you. Lisa's going to control the slides.
Yes, thank you so much. So for anyone not familiar with Real World, we are a Toronto-based film festival that exclusively features the work of Canadian filmmakers who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And there are actually two arms to Real World. So there's the film festival, which happens once a year, every October. And then we have the Real World Screen Institute, which is our year-round programming, because it's really important for us at Real World to look at increasing diversity in as holistic and comprehensive a way as possible. So we don't want to just be there at the end, at the goal line when someone's work is complete and we're showcasing it. We really want to be there every step of the way and help to develop those projects that eventually make it to the screen. So what the Screen Institute does year-round is we have incubator programs, we have industry webinars and workshops and stuff like that to really help with professional development. So one aspect of that is Access Real World, which is a database that we launched just about 6 months ago now, in July of 2020. And it's a Canada-wide database of racially diverse talent in pretty much every level of the screen industry. There's over 100 different job categories that we have on the database. And it was really important for us not to just be representing on-screen racially diverse talent, but behind the scenes as well. So below the line categories from anyone from, location scout to sound to electric grips, all of that is represented on the database, because it's not enough to just have equity in certain aspects of the industry. We really want to see it at every level. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Lisa. We actually commissioned a study last year, which looked at, we did a bunch of surveys and interviews, really to try to understand what are the barriers to employment for a lot of racially diverse people in the industry. And one thing that came up for, I think, a quarter of the respondents was unconscious bias. So as some of the other panelists have already talked about, one excuse that comes up is we don't know where to look for the talent. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that people do have an unconscious bias where they think the skilled and qualified people, racially diverse people, just don't exist with the skill sets that they're looking for. So we need to sort of challenge both of those things. And that's what we hope that a database like Access Real World will do, is really take that excuse, out of the equation. And so we're trying to present people with varying skill sets, with varying, levels of experience. And so people have these databases to look at when they say, we don't know where to look. Well, we're giving you all of these different options, so that excuse is basically gone. And if we go to the next slide, I have a few slides to show you what the database looks like. It's very sort of, the interface is very easy to use, and it's also searchable and usable in French as well as English, because we wanted to make sure that we're reaching racially diverse communities in the Francophone French-speaking areas as well. And if you go to the next slide, it was really important to us that this be searchable by, through as many parameters as possible. So whether you're looking specifically by location in a specific province, whether there's specific skills that you're looking for, like I said, we have both, a lot of below the line talent. So whether you're looking for someone with lighting experience or sound experience or a script supervisor, you can search by profession, you can search by ethnicity. We also have a section for professional affiliation. So anyone who's affiliated to a certain guild or union, you want to search, for example, if you're specifically looking for someone affiliated to the DGC, you can look there. You can also search by language. So there's a lot of different ways to interact with the site, and that was really important to us. Like I said, just to really eliminate any barriers and any excuses for not being able to find the people that you're looking for. So there are a lot of different ways to interact with the site. It is free to sign up to the site if you are a person of color. You don't need to be a member, though, to look at some of these profiles and engage with the people that are on there. To post a job, if you're a member of the database, you can post a job for free. For anyone else, it's just a $25 fee to post a job. And if you go to the next slide, Lisa, I can just show you, it's a quick snapshot of some of the jobs that are already up on the database. And I think it's important for people to look at databases like Access Real World and some of the other ones that we talked about, and really see them as, this is an actionable tool that we're giving people. They shouldn't look at it as like, okay, I've posted one job on this database and my work is done. Or, I've hired one Black person or one Indigenous person for a production and my work is done. No, these tools are really where the work begins. And we really hope that that's how people interact with them and engage with them on an ongoing basis, and look at it really mindfully and consciously. Something that Tanya Williams, who's the founder of Real World, she talks about increasing diversity. She said you should look at it like you're tending a garden. So, when you're tending a garden, you're not just sort of scattering seed haphazardly. You're not just watering it whenever you feel like it. It's a very mindful process to cultivate that garden. And so that's kind of how we look at diversity. You have to be really thoughtful with how you're doing it. It can't be a one-time thing. It needs constant engagement. So we really hope that people who use the database, whether they are members or they're employers, they really use it on a long-term basis with a long-term goal in mind. And the next slide, please, Lisa. And also, it's really important that we look at the database in a variety of ways. So it's not just a hiring or a recruiting platform. That's one aspect of it. But it's also meant to be a tool of community and network building, because as other people on the panel have already mentioned, this industry is really about who you know. And so people tend to recruit and hire and work within really small circles. And even if they are trying to expand their circles, it'll usually be, they'll ask someone they know to refer someone else. So that circle is just growing really incrementally. So we want to help expand those circles and broaden those networks and really like widen the playing field as much as possible. And it's also important to not just think of this as a tool for, white gatekeepers or white producers to come on and look for people of color. We also want the Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are on the database to use it to connect with their peers, to find other people to work with on projects, because we do have a lot of people on the database who maybe have just a year or two of experience. They might not know that many people in the industry. So this is a really great way for them to reach out to someone in their province and say, hey, do you want to work on a project together? In the study that I mentioned earlier that we had commissioned, a lot of people said that a lack of experience is also a barrier in terms of access to unions and guilds and things like that. So again, if you don't have those professional networks and those professional circles to begin with, you're not going to get access to opportunities. So this is a way for people to connect with their peers and hopefully, start to build those circles and those connections. And lastly, it's also, I think it's important that we don't look at these databases as static entities. I think they need to grow and evolve as the industry changes, as the language around diversity and things like that change. So we're really sort of proactive in reaching out to the users of the database, whether they're the members or the employers, and just really trying to get a sense of what's working for them, what are some of the gaps and challenges that they're seeing, and how we can help to address that to really help them meet their goals. So as much as possible, we're trying for it to be a very open, sort of dialogue and communication so that, everyone wins in the end. So that's a quick snapshot and overview of the database.
Thank you very much, Bohol. Very clear. And again, I mean, you're all taking such leadership in this that, the key thing that, you noted through your presentation was that this is not going to be the job of one database and one person. Mm-hmm. And this all has to happen in multiple levels and in multiple ways. What are you hearing back from employers who are using it in terms of, the people that they're finding? Because, one of the things that I think many of you have probably heard as well is, that, they're not getting people with whatever they've deemed the right kind of experience. I'd be curious what your, especially people who've posted jobs. I think here at Creative BC, we've actually posted jobs there as well that we've had recently. So
yeah.
Do you mind speaking to that?
People from like Rogers, Blue Ant Media, I mean, sort of across the spectrum, production studios, animation studios. So we're kind of, like I said, we're only about 6 months old. So we're sort of doing various phases of outreach. We have heard from members of the database who said that they've had multiple people reach out to them about jobs, or just reach out because they thought their profiles looked really interesting and they wanted to connect with them. So, the next step is really speaking to the various companies and production companies that have been posting and trying to get a sense of what has been working for them, what they would like to see, change. Some of the feedback that we have got that we're thinking about is some of the users have said we would like to be able to search by experience level. So that's one of the, some of the feedback that we've got. And also, it's not just Access Real World is not just for employers. Like I said, we also had an event with the Canadian Consulate in Los Angeles just last week. And so we actually selected people from the Access Real World database, primarily filmmakers and writers, to participate in that event. So you're also getting opportunities, there's various sort of aspects of the way that you can get opportunities through Access Real World, and direct job postings is just one of them.
Right. So, and you said anybody can search it. You don't have to.
You don't have to be a person of color to so you have to be a person of color to sign up as a member. Anyone can look through the website and just see what kind of people are out there, what kind of experience levels they have, what kind of projects they've worked on. And people can post. We've really left it up to the members how much information they want to share. Like, there's no mandatory fields that they have to fill out. So if someone wants to share a demo reel or a CV or their agent's contact information, it's totally up to them how much they want to share.
And have you had any, because Valerie spoke to this around privacy and security for, safety for individuals who are featured on the site. Mm-hmm. How are you addressing that aspect of it?
Yeah, so we've actually sent out surveys to all of the members of the database to get their feedback and share if there's anything that they're not comfortable with. So we haven't had any concerns come up about that. And like I said, we're leaving it open to members to decide how much information they feel comfortable sharing. We haven't heard any feedback to that regard.
Yeah, that's great. So a national database. Yes. Anybody, if you're not, tuning in from wherever, you can participate in this. You can use it to post jobs. I think that's really important as well. And, the other thing to keep in mind is it's not just productions or broadcasters. It can be if you are, a mobile dressing room company. This is a great place to source talent as well. So I think that job board is a place that, and I think some of your other platforms are doing this as well, that can also be something that's hugely beneficial. And again, don't be afraid is what I keep saying. I've done a lot of these panels lately. It's like, this is not a disruption. This is how we are going to effectively be successful and move forward and actually have any kind of equity or sovereignty for Indigenous people across our industry. So, take time to dive into all the work these folks are doing. So thank you, Bohol. We'll come back to you at the end with the others. And Joan Jenkinson, thank you for hanging in there as it's almost dinner time in Toronto. And welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. I wish I was actually there, though. But
I know. I wish we were all together as well, and hopefully next year we will be. And yeah, kudos to Actsafe, another conference that's adapted to our new environment. So welcome, Joan. You're going to talk to us today about the Black Screen Office, which is 3 months old. We're winding up Black History Month, or what is deemed Black History Month on our calendars. But talk to us about, you're the inaugural executive director. What is the Black Screen Office and the work that you're doing there?
As you know, the Black Screen Office was born out of the Black Lives Matter movement and what happened to George Floyd. We were born in the middle of a pandemic. And for me, being the first Black History Month where we are an organization is a pretty poignant experience for me. We're in the middle of a massive civil rights movement, and we can't take for granted the changes that have taken place, the shifts. We've seen people, have all kinds of emotional responses. I've seen white people who are just swimming in mortification about how their privilege has made them complicit. I've spoken to Black people and myself who feel some catharsis around being acknowledged that there is anti-Black racism and that there has been oppression and that we have been traumatized by it. And so we've also seen people come together in solidarity and other people who are paralyzed by what to do. So I was asked to join a group of senior Black professionals in the industry to really collectively share our experiences and think about, talk about the fact that we've lived through all of this and what do we, from our own experience want to share and how do we want to share it. So we sent an open letter to the Minister of Canadian Heritage to, say, it's not just an American thing. Anti-Black racism exists here and certainly within our industry. And we are here to tell you that, it has been our experience. So that, in addition to many years of advocacy, led to I guess the birth of the Black Screen Office.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really, what we exist because, we acknowledge that oppression has been there and anti-Black racism is a part of our life. But what we want to do moving forward is to, build a future with hope and change in mind, to celebrate Black culture and Black stories, and not be defined by our oppression.
Yeah, that's amazing, everything that you just summarized, because I think you really condensed something. You said a lot there, but it really is a testament to a lot of people who came together through a very traumatic time and so difficult. So really want to congratulate you and all of the other people who did this work and are just, first of all, I've known Joan for many, many years, and Joan has been an advocate around this for a long time. It's not just the emergence of the Black Screen Office, but certainly, someone like you with your leadership and your experience in the Canadian industry across many different places is so valuable. And I think that's where, Telefilm Canada, who is the largest funder of Canadian films, has invested in the Black Screen Office. So tell me what that means.
It was a great vote of confidence for Telefilm to approach us with this annual funding that was startup money, but we know that we have it on an annual basis, which is a great safety net for us. But after Telefilm came on board, so did CMF and the CMPA. We've had private donations. And another exciting thing is that people are approaching us, like broadcasters and funders, to say, we want to work with you. We want to specifically fund Black-led projects. And it's like things, we had our planning session for this a couple of weeks ago, and Anthony reached out to me and say, hey, what can we do together? And I just thought that was really great, but I'm getting that from different people. It's like, how can we partner to move your agenda forward, which is to have Black stories being made and seen, and having Black people work throughout the entire industry.
And Joan, is it just you right now as like sort of the official staff person with the Black Screen Office?
There's me, and I have a coordinator and a
Okay.
very, very hands-on board of directors.
Yes.
Yes, so we're gearing up. There's a lot of exciting things coming up.
Yeah, so you said a lot of people, broadcasters, other funders are approaching you. I think we've had conversations and where, how can we partner? So what does that partnership mean? Is it going to be in funding programs? Is it going to be in advocacy work? Can you talk a little bit more about what the Black Screen Office will do?
So we're here to support Black people throughout the industry, as I said, and we want to create access, build networks. We want to see the Black community thrive and be successful in their careers. What we don't want to do is replicate anything that anybody else is doing. We're taking a very hands-on, sort of bespoke approach to career development. So we are developing a career accelerator program, and that is looking at where individuals are right now, where they want to go, and then helping them to map a path to get there through various approaches. So I was really glad to hear Culturebrew and Access Real World and Out on Set talk, because these are great services, and there are a lot of professional development programs out there that are just fantastic. And so what we want to do is partner with those organizations and create a directory of programming that's available that can help our members move along in their career path. And we can help guide them on a one-on-one basis to do that. So the exciting thing right now is that these partnerships with broadcasters and funders are developing in a real world way, where We're getting development and production financing being offered to our members to tell Black stories specifically, and they keep coming. So it's a really, that was my real aspiration, is that we're going beyond mentorship and networking, and we're actually getting people jobs, and they're making money, and they're building their careers, and they have their foot in the door. Some for the first time, some, who are in mid-career and are trying to progress and finding barriers. So this is like a fantastic time right now for, I think, for the Black community, and for the partnerships that are developing, because they benefit everybody.
And I have to say, I'm really grateful that you were able to be here today, because you have a national scope. And, I think that's really important for people outside of, Ontario, often with a lot of funding programs can become very centralized, whether it's intentional or not. So can you just sort of speak to how the outreach across the country, being, a team of 2 people, but how you're starting to do that?
So one of the things, I'm really impatient. So I have all these plans, and I, expect that they're going to happen next week, but it takes a lot of planning and fundraising to get things going. But so our first thing is to do a national outreach. We've made a lot of connections already, particularly among Black Francophones, because they are, literally 10, 15 years behind the rest of the country. It's really shocking to me to hear, officials there saying that anti-Black racism doesn't exist. But we know that, Black Francophones literally have no access. In the history of Canadian television, there have been 2 web series that have been, or I think they might even be episodes, that have been made by and about Black people in Quebec. So we're making a very special outreach to really be in solidarity with the people in Quebec. Recently, I spoke at Access Manitoba event, and then several Black filmmakers from Winnipeg reached out to me, and I thought, oh, I didn't know you were here. So it was really great. And, I think we're just spreading out and moving across the country as we can, but we're certainly going to build up momentum in the next little while with a particular national outreach program that we're starting up.
Yeah, and I think what you just said is really interesting, because it is about, people see themselves in an office. They may be a filmmaker that are here in BC somewhere, who are a Black filmmaker who doesn't even know, or didn't know there was a place that they could even see themselves that was going to support them in a different way than traditional organizations have. And I think that's, it can be nuanced, but it's not, right? Like this is a huge need that you're addressing. And, you also talked about the number of productions. So, I've heard you say that, in the history of Canadian TV, there's been 4 dramatic and 1 comedy series by major networks made by or about Black Canadians. So, I think we can guess why there's been so few, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, it really is a shocking number. Every time I hear it, I'm like, how? Like, how could we?
In the history of Canadian television.
History. It's just, it's shocking. But you know what I've heard, like, people candidly say to me is that, they've said it over the years, but is that Black programs are not viable, period. We've heard distributors say it over the years, we're not going to take on your film because we can't sell it internationally. And that pretty much puts the kibosh on a film in Canada being made, because Telefilm won't accept your project without a distributor. I've heard broadcasters say, we don't do urban programs because they don't reach a mainstream audience. But that's proven to be so false, as we finally allowed Black people to make programs. They're having massive critical acclaim and box office success. You look at Black Panther, one of the biggest movies ever made. I May Destroy You, which is the It show right now that has such a beautiful auteur voice that as a Black woman who's written and acting in this particular project. I think the world is just hungry for fresh, unique content. And, we've been here, our stories have been here. And I think once we have the opportunity to tell them, I think people are going to be, astounded and amazed. They're going to be inspired and entertained, which is what we want to see happen.
I think many of us of a certain generation, we came into this industry because we didn't see ourselves, right, reflected on television. And it is hard when it still is largely like that. And, you brought up Black Panther and I May Destroy You. There's been a lot of controversy about the Golden Globes. And there are no Black members of the Hollywood Foreign Press, which is, I think, a confusion to anybody if you follow the Golden Globes. But, there's been a social media movement the last few days around really calling that out by very, senior, accomplished, not just Black people in the industry, but across the board. What is the importance of that kind of advocacy around these types of issues from your perspective?
I mean, it's tremendously important. It's just so surprising that we're talking about a civil rights movement. We're talking about people's eyes being opened and they can't unsee what they've seen, but it's in actions that you really see what people believe, and we're not seeing things moving quickly at all. Like there's still only 4 Black TV drama series and 1 comedy series that have been on major television. So I think there's been some shift in the US, but we're not seeing it here yet. And it really is in some ways a gatekeeping kind of function that those associations have when it comes to promoting Black talent and Black shows.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on it's astonishing. We have heard of incidents just as early as this, what is the word I'm trying to use? This week here in BC, around some very specific anti-Black racism on a production set, that at the same time, it's like, we have, like, how is this even happening, right? So I think the importance of the role that the Black Screen Office is going to play in our entire ecosystem, along with all the other tools and directories and the Indigenous Screen Office, like it's, like Bohol said, there's no excuses, but, really it's moving from that performative to the transformative to actual actions. And that is what we'll see on the other end of it. So thank you, Joan. I'm going to invite everybody to come back. We're going to see everybody together for a moment. We've got about 10 minutes left. And what I'm going to ask is sort of any last sort of ideas and thoughts people want to share before I pass it back to Manu. But, Joan, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to make sure that people heard today?
Actually, what I wanted to mention is that we are doing some research, and one of them really ties in with what Lisa was saying and what you've mentioned, Prem. We're doing a best practices guide for creating authentic, inclusive content for underrepresented groups. So it would be like a companion to the pathways and protocols guide that the Indigenous community, the Indigenous Screen Office has produced, because there's a lot about dealing with Indigenous communities there, but there are issues that are unique to other groups. And I've been asked many times, like, do you have something? So we're just at the tail end of getting a project finance. So I wanted to let people know that was coming.
Great, good. And then I'm sure I feel like, Joan, you and I are talking almost on a weekly basis lately. So I'm sure that once that's happening, up and running, we'll be able to make sure we have the community out here engaged in supporting that. So thank you. Valerie, you kicked us off, so I'm going to come back to you. You've heard a lot from your colleagues, here in BC and across the country. Any final ideas or thoughts or questions you want to share?
Well, I just love the opportunity to get to hear more about what's happening with Access Real World and what Anthony is doing with Out on TV. I wanted to speak a little bit to something that Anthony brought up and Bohol, that this idea of the artist controlling the information, because they're worried about their safety. And I did want to mention that we are also aware of that as well. I mean, we do say that it's mandatory to state your racial or ethnic background, because that's the whole reason to be in culturebrew.art. But for other things such as gender, sexual orientation, disabilities, we've built in a sort of a 3 levels of consent, because a bigger aspect of culturebrew.art is to build community among the artists. And when we did community consultations, I just remember we'd have a room full of LGBT queer artists from all different racial backgrounds, and they go, "Oh my God, who are you? I need to get to know you." That people are so isolated, and there's very few opportunities unless you're working on a project to connect with other people. And so we put in this idea, this system where, if they decide if they identify as trans, say, and there's all sorts of reasons, to try to respect the safety of trans people. But we want them to be able to connect with their community as well. So we put in a level you could check off the identity of trans, but you also could check off, if you want to be able to be found by other trans artists in the CBA site. So that's sort of like the lowest level. If you just want to be open to other trans artists finding you, you could check that box. Then we open it up that, the next level is you're willing to be found by all the other artists in the CBA site. And then the third level is you're willing to be searched and found by the employers, the engagers. And so that was one other level we thought was important, to be able to allow people to connect and build community and find people like themselves, because so often we just feel alone. Mm-hmm. And we think that, I'm having this problem. It just must be me. We do this self-gaslighting kind of thing. And so we want to be able to create a space for people to find each other. And so our messaging system too, the next iteration is to allow group messaging. So do the same thing. Once somebody finds somebody, who has similar intersections in their identity, they can start having conversations about, I'm having this issue, anybody else share that issue, or I want to introduce you to this person, and so to create space for people to be able to create what we call micro communities, within the larger community of racialized and Indigenous artists. And another aspect of safety was we're going to build in a way for people to block messages, because let's face it, the people are going to contact other people. It's not going to be pleasant. And so we're giving them that option to do that as well.
You have built a social network, Valerie.
We are. Somebody said, "Oh, you're building Signal for BIPOC artists." And, I guess we are, we have a little bit of ways to go, but that way of connecting was really important to the community. And so that's what we listen to. And so that's part of what we're building.
Yeah. And I think that sense of why community and connecting with others who you share a lot of things with is so critical, and why the Black Screen Office has emerged at this specific time has never been more important and critical, because these sort of flashes of things come and go in the past, and there's never been a way to congregate. And Anthony, what have you been thinking as you've heard from others, and final remarks that you'd like to share with participants today?
Well, first, I'm really impressed with what all the other panelists are doing. I was aware of some of it, but it's always great to know the depth of it, which I wasn't necessarily familiar with before. I think one thread for me that really sticks out is, awareness is different than action. And I think everyone's kind of touched on a bit of the fact that that we're awareness is at an all-time high for whichever kind of constituencies we're talking about in the broader community. But being aware that there's anti-Black racism, or being aware that people are attacked for being trans, is very different than doing something about it. And I think that's part of what, what is really important for us, and also that being in these spaces for people, even if they are employed, it actually is exhausting being in that space because you kind of are always editing, and you're editing yourself. And we're in a creative industry where we should want to kind of not have limits like that on people. And I think that's what the work that all these groups are doing is so important for that. I think the challenge though is for people that are outside of these groups to actually like use these tools that are being developed, and take that, move them forward, because that's really where the utility is going to come from, is actual use, versus just like awareness and a little bit of like just things that are more performative.
Yeah, very well put. Thank you, Anthony. And Bohol, as you're closing out your Saturday afternoon into your Saturday evening, any final thoughts or remarks?
Yeah, I think it's really important that if we're really serious about trying to achieve our missions and our goals, that we don't operate in silos and we work with each other as much as possible. So that's why we're at Access Real World trying really hard to reach out to other independent film festivals, other film collectives, producer alliances and organizations in BC, in Quebec, in Newfoundland and Labrador. Like, we're trying to make those connections and build those relationships as much as possible so that our members get to know each other. Hopefully our members work with each other down the line. So we're really trying to connect with, as many like-minded organizations and film festivals as we can. So I hope that some of the people watching or listening to this panel reach out, and it would be amazing to really try to build those connections and bridges.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And Lisa Purdy, anything you want to add as we wrap up before we flip it back to Manu?
I just love that everyone comes from a place of like pure heart, and also the sort of genesis. Like, I love that Bohol has a film festival, a 20-year film festival in the background, and Valerie's work in performance and building community, and what Anthony's trying to do North America wide. And of course, Joan, that incredible work and your career development support that you're offering. All of these efforts together, I think, will make such a difference for what we need to do as an industry in BC. So thank you everyone for all that you do.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. That is a great note to end on. Thank you so much for spending part of your Saturday with us. Really appreciated. Thank you, Manu, for inviting us to talk about this today. Way more to come on this in the weeks and months ahead from everybody here and from Creative BC. So thank you so much. Back to you, Manu.
Thanks, Prem. Thanks, Prem. I mean, thanks for moderating this session, and actually thanks to all the panelists. I've been making some notes, and some words that actually really struck for me are like diversity, inclusive, authenticity, content, growth, action, awareness. Anthony, it's not just being aware; it's what action you take. So what a great session, and no silos. There are so many resources and support, and thanks for sharing all these resources and support with us. And I also wanted to remind everybody that the recording of this session will also be available on our Actsafe conference website soon. So you can have, if you missed to take notes, there is another chance to get all that information again. But thank you everyone on the panel, Bohol, Joan, Lisa, Anthony, and Valerie. And thanks, Prem, for moderating this session. And I also wanted to thank again Iridia Medical for sponsoring this session. Thank you again.
Thank you, Manu. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Manu.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.